What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. We are back with our final preview for week 2 of the Autumn Internationals. This is going to be Scotland versus Australia. It's going to be a great game. If anyone who hasn't seen these preview videos before, even though we've done a bunch of them now on the channel, this is of course where we chuck on a game of Rugby 20 in the background of the teams that are going to be playing, and then over the top we talk about the players who we think is going to do really well, who we think is going to do really badly, and finally give a score prediction, all to do with the real life game as it goes on. It's set to be a really good match. There's going to be a lot to talk about in this one, so let's get this game kicked off and underway. Alrighty, Adam Hastings will get us kicked off. Let's start off to the left. We're going to mix it. We're going for a bomb this time. We'll see how this works out. Can we recover the ball? No, we can't. Anyway, it's actually a really bad kickoff. It's going wrong already from the beginning, as may well happen in the real life game. It's going to be a really fun competition, this one. Scotland versus Australia. This is a game, of course, we have seen in the past that has had some controversy surrounding it before. We all remember that elusive game with a last-minute penalty given and the ref running off the field. Scotland felt hard done by with that one. Coming into this game then, Scotland and Australia both probably in very good form, to be fair. Australia have certainly peaked up more going throughout this year. They had a couple of games that didn't really go their way against France, or at least not how they would have wanted to. France coming in with a little bit more of a B team, and Australia definitely seemed to struggle with them a little bit. They had a whole bunch to try and deal with there. They've gone on to play in their Southern Hemisphere Championship, and they went on to do okay, actually. They beat South Africa, they beat Argentina. They didn't manage to beat the All Blacks, unfortunately, but these days who can, including myself as a Welshman who went to go watch that Wales-New Zealand game. It's a difficult task. Let's start off talking about Scotland, though. So Scotland had probably the best Six Nations we've seen from them in a long time, if ever, in all honesty. They really stepped up. They became a lot more aggressive, a lot more attacking, beating big teams in fairly, surprising ways. Beating England at Twickenham at home was a big call not a lot of people saw coming. Scotland really introducing a lot of new players, having a much larger depth in squad, and having a really good Six Nations for them. They went on to the summer. Unfortunately, they didn't get to play any of their summer games due to viruses that we can't mention, and then they went on to play Tonga last week. Now, unfortunately, I was at that Wales-New Zealand game. I did a vlog on the channel for anyone who hasn't seen that, so I wasn't able to catch the Scotland-Tonga game. I got to see the first half, and it looked pretty rampant from Scotland, and then I came home later on to see the second half, and basically just found out Scotland are amazing, or Tonga are struggling desperately. Kyle staying with us, 4 tries, which is a record breaking of like 60 years. He's the first player to score 4 tries in Edinburgh in one game, I think. Is fantastic to do on your debut. There's a couple of these new boys now really showing off. So looking into this game, Scotland versus Australia, a lot to prove in this game, a lot to prove. They're not doing sort of one-trick pony manoeuvres and just beating teams like Tonga. They want to show off against a bit of an in-form Australia team. So let's talk about the team that's been named. So I'll check it on screen for you guys now. So starting off in this front row, Pierre Schumann, George Turner and Xander Fagerson. I believe this was the same front row we saw against Tonga, and in all honesty they looked like they were doing pretty well from what I've got to see of some of the highlights and stuff. They looked like they were pretty dominant in some of those scrums and some of those rucks. They, of course, they've got a better team here. They were really going to look to turn over that game. In the lock department, Sam Skinner and Grant Gilchrist. Now this is a names so that we probably see a little bit more. It'd be nice to see Gilchrist back in the team. Their lock department for Scotland really worked a lot better in the Six Nations. The only game I really saw Scotland struggling against was Ireland in terms of that line-out. Ireland really just got all over them with some of their players they have in the line-out. And hopefully players like Skinner and Gilchrist can get it together for this game and enforce a bit of power. You don't really want to be giving Australia mauls if possible. You don't want to be defending those 5-metre mauls, so you don't want to be giving them line-outs, or you at least don't want to let them win line-outs. You've got to be able to get in there and contest. Looking further back, someone else that might be being in the air for that one, Jamie Ritchie in there again as vice-captain, with Hamish Watson at 7 and Matt Fagerson at 8. Again, this is the back row we saw going in against Tonga, and looking good again. There's some technically very good players in here now. Jamie Ritchie and Hamish Watson, the turnover rates in terms of jackling and tackling is brilliant, and Matt Fagerson is just a monster in just terms of running from that backfield as a number 8, going forwards, not willing to slow down for anyone. He wants to kill whoever's in front of him. So as a 1 to 8, out. This is a good 1-8. This is not a great deal of difference from what we saw in that Tonga game. So, they've had a bit of time to synergise together a little bit, getting more informed what they want to be doing. And Australia have been doing pretty well in terms of scrummaging. They've definitely got a couple of big boys in their scrums. You can't afford to be messing about with it too much. So, bringing out your own big boys for the scrum and managing to hold out is certainly going to be a real positive. In terms of the backs then, a new partnership now in this halfback partnership now. Ali Price and Finn Russell. This has been what a lot of people wanting to see. These, of course, are probably the two main choices a lot of people now want to see in the Scotland side. Ali Price doing really well. Losing his vice-captaincy this week. Not really sure what the reasoning is behind that, but Finn Russell taking over as that captain now. He's got back. He's back in the good books of all of the Scottish coaches after having a couple of issues here and there with some of the management in time, but he went off with the Lions. I thought he did quite well in the games I saw him playing for the Lions, in all honesty, so it'll be nice to see Finn Russell back in that shirt. In the centre partnership, Sam Johnson and Chris Harris. Again, this is now getting towards more of the set Scotland team that we're seeing. Chris Harris, again, having a good little tournament going up with the Lions as well. And last year, I said at the start of the Six Nations, or this year, I guess, really, but I started said the Six Nations at the start, how much I was maybe not that much of a fan of Chris Harris, and I did question his defensive work, but this year it has been something he has really worked on, and defensively is one of the more sound centres I've seen this year play anyway. So really looking forward to see Chris Harris come in, and Sam Johnson, of course, with those running lines in that inside centre. And then a back three setup that a lot of Scottish people will be very happy to see. Duhan van der Merwe back on that left wing, Darcy Graham moving to right wing this week instead of fullback last week, and Stuart Hogg there as captain. So not just have you got a captain, you've got two vice captains. What's going on there? But there's a lot of captaincy going on there, a lot of people in charge, but as a back three, this is the Scotland world class team now. They'll be very happy to have all three of these lads back in. Stuart Hogg, we don't need to say a lot about. Everyone knows who Stuart Hogg is now with some of his big boots and some of his great counter running. Stuart Hogg getting into form, for me personally, for the first time in a long time in that Six Nations. Stuart Hogg had the best Six Nations for a good few years this year. So it's been nice to see him getting back in. Darcy Graham's playing really well at club level, and Duhan van der Merwe scoring a bunch of tries with the Lions. However, did struggle a little bit against South Africa. So hopefully you can do just as well with a different side of the hemisphere team in the terms of Australia. But as a 1-15, this is a confident 1-15. This is about as good as Scotland can really put out, minus your own personal preferences. Maybe you'd want to see someone else instead of Darcy Graham. Maybe you'd rather see Darcy Graham at fullback. Maybe you'd rather see Adam Hastings maybe at fly half. Not really sure where people would make too many changes. Maybe you'd want one of the Gray brothers in the locks. But in all honesty, this is a pretty good starting 15. As we slowly get towards half time here, this half is going on for as long as humanly possible, as we're going to have a bit of a kicking battle here. We'll have a look at the Scotland replacements. So we've got Ewan Ashman, Jamie Batty and Ollie Kebble. So I believe that might have been the same three as last week. I can't remember who was the replacement hooker last week. It might not have been. But Ollie Kebble, again, I do talk a lot about Ollie Kebble. I really like him. I think he's a really good player. He just gets in there just to hurt people, really. It's a lot of fun. In replacements else in the forwards, Jamie Hodgson and Josh Bayless. Now, there's a couple of names I'm not massively familiar with. Jamie Hodgson is not a name I know at all. Josh Bayless I've obviously heard of before, but it's not too versed in terms of game performance stuff, how we'll see him get on. So hopefully those two can have a good game. Certainly a big move to put lesser cap players on against a team like Australia, but there's always talk about Australia maybe not being at half strength. So, we'll get to see how the Australian team looks a little bit later on. And then in the replacement backs, George Horn, who doesn't get a great deal of time of gameplay anymore, but I do like George Horn. It'd be nice to see him come on at some point. Adam Hastings, having done that full circle now, he's back in the team and probably remaining in that number 2. Haven't seen a lot of Van der Vaalt recently. Not sure if he's going to be playing a lot of Scotland games in the future. I don't think he played terribly when I saw him last, but Adam Hastings certainly a safe pair of hands to bring on in that second half. And finally in that 23, Kyle Steyn, the man who's just scoring tries for fun at this point. But it's one thing to score those tries against Tonga. It's going to be another thing to see him play against Australia. And if you come on and score a couple of tries against Australia, you're really setting down a bit of a precedent for just how good you can be. So I think as a Scotland team goes, this is a good Scotland team. It's quite nice to see that they're going to be bolstering up with so many of the big players, but also how much their depth in squad is growing. As we get closer now to this World Cup, they've got a couple of tough games in their World Cup. I believe they're in the group with Ireland and I think it was South Africa, wasn't it? I think it was South Africa as well. So, a couple of tough games there. You've got to be able to beat teams like Australia, like South Africa, like maybe even New Zealand at some point. So, you've got to have that depth in squad to be able to play those games. Speaking of which, let's move on to talk about Australia. Australia on the up and up. There was a bit of talk leading into this autumn series whether they were going to have a lot of their players or players might be missing. I haven't really kept up super up to date with some of the news that's been going on with them, but we want to see Australia again. Australia have been sort of teetering on that edge of the tier 1 rugby. Some games they're brilliant, and some games they seem to really struggle. There was one game they had against France that they literally just threw away for no reason in that summer series. So they'll definitely be looking to try and hold it together, but hopefully this Australian team can provide us with some entertaining rugby at least. So in this front row then, James Slipper, Fainga and Alalatoa. So, that's a pretty solid front row. Not necessarily sure if it's the starting front row you'd probably have. I know they do like to bring Taliala Tupou on a little bit later. That's what we saw in those France games, just when people are a little bit more tired. I'm not super versed in some of the Australian forwards, so hopefully that'll be a decent starting front row. In terms of the lock, Rory Arnold and Isaac Rodder. There's a couple of names there that I actually not too known to me, so that'll be interesting to see how they get on. The Scotland lineout's probably looking to be quite good in this game, so it'll be interesting to see how the Australians manage to cope with it. In this back three, Rob Leota, Michael Hooper as the captain, and Rob Valentini going in there as well. Again, Leota, not a name I know a lot about, so there could be slightly less of a capped team going into this Scotland game, so maybe Australia are going to struggle a little bit. Michael Hooper, of course, a very strong captain, does lead the team very well, and Valentini's up for definitely playing some really good rugby in that 8. In fact, I've seen him with some of the ball carrying. He's a bit of a monster. But 1 to 8, not necessarily the strongest, but that could be my own knowledge on this team. They could be a lot stronger than I'm giving them credit for. So hopefully they'll be managed to hold out there. In terms of the backs, Nick White and James O'Connor. So mixing it up again in this fly half. There's a lot of different fly halves going in now for this Australian team. I think they're struggling to find who they want as their starting fly half. Personally, I've been really enjoying seeing Quade Cooper getting on with some of his fly half duties now. Lola Co for me was struggling a little bit, and James O'Connor is, I believe, quite a young lad still, isn't he, James O'Connor? So hopefully you can step up. It's going to be a bit of a tough game, especially when you're going to be having people like Finn Russell across from you. I'm sure Finn Russell will be dropping a couple of bombs right on your head for someone else to smash into you with, so hopefully they can hold out. In the centre for them, Hunter Paisami and Ikitau. This is a much stronger backline now than the forwards, I would say. Hunter Paisami and Ikitau, both very, very tough lads to stop, especially when they've got a bit of speed behind them, a bit of room to work with. They will bounce off a couple of tackles, so that could be a big move, actually. Luckily, Scotland have got Chris Harris in that centre channel, but I can definitely see the centre work being a couple of big clashes here as well. Looking at the back three then, Jordan Pataya, Tom Wright and Andrew Kellaway. Andrew Kellaway playing in fullback as well, which is interesting. I have Kellaway down as on the right wing more than a fullback. I'm sure he's perfectly versed in playing either or. Kellaway's been quite impressive for me in the games I've seen him in recently. I've been really enjoying seeing some of the rugby. Definitely gets himself over that try line when he can. Jordan Pataya is a very, very quick player as well. Will definitely be making the ground. So they can't afford to be too defensive, Scotland, in terms of spreading it wide, because these players will get round you. We've already seen in the Lions Tour and in the last Six Nations that Duhan van der Merwe's defensive work can get into question. He can cut in short a lot of the times rather than staying out on his wing. So you'd really hope people like Tom Wright and Andrew Kellaway might be looking to try and work their way around on his wing if the defensive side won't hold up. But as a 1 to 15, I would say good. I would say this is a good team, but not necessarily the strongest. So that could call into question what we're going to do in terms of the score prediction at the end. As we are coming towards the game, let's quickly check out the replacements. McInerney, Angus Bell, and Taniela Tupou coming in there. I love Tupou. I think he's awesome. The handling is not the best. I'm not going to lie from Taniela Tupou, but you don't need it from him. He's a big man. He just runs forward and runs people over. But it'd be nice to see him come on in that second half, especially if you've got some tired props. In terms of the scrum, in terms of Scotland, if they don't make that substitution earlier on, Tupou will walk over you. Will Skelton and Pete Samu also in there. Tate McDermott, who's actually playing relatively good rugby. Probably maybe could have looked into actually got in the starting team maybe. Curtly Beale and Isaiah Parise, I'm going to guess. Not someone I know in Isaiah Parise. Certainly a couple of people missing here, though. You know, the Coria Bettys and stuff like that. There's a couple of people missing from this back row. I don't think the backs are necessarily too bad for this Australian side, but I certainly actually think Scotland are coming in with a stronger side. So although we did the prediction videos before we got into doing this series of videos for all the previews, I'm going to go against that. I'm actually going to call for a Scotland win here. I'm going to go against my my original prediction before the teams were even announced. I'm going to say Scotland to win by 9. I think that's going to be my call, guys. Bit wild, bit out there, but we'll see how that gets on. But of course, I am but one man on the internet talking nonsense about rugby. So if you've enjoyed this video today, make sure you drop it a like and drop down in the comments what you think is going to happen in this game, who you think is going to win, and what you think the final score difference will be. We are, of course, doing all of the Super Brew as well for anyone who wants to get in there and join your predictors and check all your guesses down there as well. It's a lot of fun. There is a video on how to join that group if you fancy it as well. But I hope you've all enjoyed today, guys. We will be doing these videos for all of the autumn games as they're going on, so make sure you subscribe to the channel just to keep up to date with all of them as they come out. I hope you've all enjoyed today, guys. I will see you next time. Bye bye.